Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5 Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today I'm going to talk about the difference between lust and sex, and that sex is beautiful as long as we use it in the ordered way it's meant to be used. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri, Filio et Spiritui Sancto, secutor in principio et nunc et semper, et secula seculorum. I'm recording here at the Black Sea. I'm at a town called Silas, which is about an hour away from Istanbul. So yesterday I went to Troy, which is on the Aegean side of Turkey, and now I'm on the Black Sea side, so I'm on the northern side. So behind me is an old Byzantine fort that was constructed and later refortified by the Ottomans. So it dates probably from about the 15th century. And then beyond those rocks would be the open Black Sea. So if I went straight behind me, I'd go across the Black Sea to the Ukraine, to the Crimean Peninsula. And there's a cat right next to me. One thing that I've noticed when I was here, when I've been here in Istanbul and I'm leaving tomorrow to go back to the States, is there's so many stray cats and dogs just everywhere in the streets, just everywhere, just big dogs just walking around, really tranquil, really cool. They're not rabid or anything, and then just cats everywhere, just cats and dogs, and the city takes care of them. Either way, so we do have a playlist here on dating, Catholic dating and Catholic marriage, and I think it's so important because, look, how can I say, part of being human is the drive for sex, and I think that many men especially are kind of raised in this idea, this mentality that sex is bad. And I think certainly women are taught this, the Catholic guilt as they call it with the women, with sex is bad. And I think so much of that really is imbued by the secular mindset of sex being bad, because sex is not bad. What's bad is the sex that we have in the West, which is typically sex outside of marriage, which is typically porn, especially if you're a man. So this is why I think it gets adulterated into thinking it's bad, because most of the time when we're introduced to sex, it's not in the ordered way. And this is kind of connected to masturbation too. Why is masturbation considered a sin? Because our genitalia is only really meant for one purpose, and it's not for self-gratification or even for a pleasure in itself. Our genitalia is meant for the copulative act, reproduction. And if you look at what was God's first commandment, Genesis 1, verse 40, to be fruitful and multiply. That is it. But I think a lot of people think of sex as being bad. What's bad is lust. Even certainly lust as a man looks at porn or a woman's looking at Channing Tatum or whatever. We understand that lust is bad. Lust is in the list along with fornication and adultery that we see enumerated out many times in the New Testament by Paul and by Jesus, either in Revelation or in the Gospels. But sex is not bad. God gave us the commandment to be fruitful and multiply. And he gave us the gift to make sex pleasurable. Speaking of random cats around here, have you ever seen cats having sex? It's not pleasant. The male cat has a thorns on his penis. So sex is not pleasurable for the felines. But it is pleasurable for us, and that is a gift that God gave us. But with a lot of gifts, because of the fall of Adam and Eve, it's been contaminated. And so I think we just need this reminder, because all of us, even if we consider ourselves to be good traditional Christian Catholics, we've all been raised in the West. And since we've been raised in the West, this cat is 1 foot away from me. Since we've been raised in the West, we have been propagandized and programmed. Unless you were raised in a homeschooling world, like a compound where you were only watching VHSs of Superbook and EWTN content, we all grew up watching Friends. We were watching whatever show that was on NBC, ABC, CBS, and all these shows, of course, have fornication in it. So you're watching these shows at 12, 13, 16 in college, even though on one level you know that you're getting programmed. Maybe on one level you do, many people don't know, But these shows, it's okay, go have sex outside of marriage. Oh, you meet a guy, you meet a girl, you fall in love, have sex, right? It's in the episode. Most of the sex that's depicted in movies and television are not married sex, because married sex is meant to be boring. Yeah, it's boring. And so this is the way we're raised. So when we start to date, whether it be high school or college, even as Catholics, most Catholics are what? Having sex outside of marriage. That's part of dating, right? You meet somebody, you have to have sex, and then maybe you get engaged, maybe you get married. And this is the disordered way of living. We are meant to be horny, for lack of a better word. We are meant to have a sexual drive. And this is why there's this saying of get married young and have more babies that you can afford. Because that is the natural order of things. The natural order of things is God gave us this gift of sex. But it's meant to be done in the confines of marriage. And I think you see this really fleshed out like in 1 Corinthians 7, which we have an episode here talking about should men stay single. It's Paul saying that men should be single. And if you look at 1 Corinthians 7, you look at 1 Corinthians 13, I think there's a lot over there that really kind of fleshes out sex, and that sex is good. And one of the reasons we are to marry is that sex is an outlet, right? Is an outlet. Marriage is an outlet for sex. And Paul talks about that in that chapter, how if you cannot control your loins, get married, because that's the natural outlet of sex. We have sexual urges, sexual desires, all these things. God gave us that. That is not necessarily concupiscence. But it needs to be funneled, like from a male perspective, literally funneled into the woman. And that is the order. And part of that order is when you have the copulatory act, when you copulate, when you have coitus, the natural fruit of that is children, which is what God intended. It's God intended. So there's a natural order to these things. Sexual attraction leads to marriage, which leads to, I don't want to say unlimited, but sex. And you see in the same part of Corinthians, men, we are supposed to surrender our bodies to our women. Women are supposed to surrender their bodies to their men. So it's if you need it, I will give it to you. If she needs it, I will give it to her. It's the natural total surrender of the body. Like Paul talks about in Ephesians 5. It's the same thing there. So, this is the natural order of things, but I think we have to constantly reprogram ourselves, because most of us in the West don't see it that way, because most people, if you poll them, would tell you that premarital sex is fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Hook up. Nowadays, people are even marrying. They're marrying later, or they're not marrying at all, and they're just cohabiting. And so now you live in the Tinder world, and the Tinder world is, this is the easiest time to get laid for men and for women. In the Tinder hookup world, you're getting sex on the second date. Tinder and all the swipe apps, their whole orientation is for hookups. It's for sex. So now in the Tinder world that we live in, is you have sex early on and then you get to know each other. Instead of the old way, which was, and you see this on like Netflix show, like Bridgerton and these other shows, Jane Austen novels, where courtship was very short. And marriage, and we've talked about this in several episodes on this playlist, marriage was not about the pitter-patter. And you still see this over here, like in the Muslim countries, in other places, where marriage is understood that if you actually find the person attractive or even like them, that's great, it's a bonus. But marriage is about, it's an institution. It's for the procreation and education of children. It's for those types of things. And if you predicate it on the pitter-patter of the heart, like we've really done in the West since the Victorian era, well, what's going to happen when you no longer have the pitter-patter? It's okay to leave somebody. And it's not meant to be that way. True love is not the pitter-patter of the heart. True love is what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 13. It's selfless. Right? It's selfless. So I would tell you, especially if you're still young, get married young. That's the ordered way to do it. Women, why buy the cow? You get the milk for free, right? There's a certain understanding that we've always intuitively known. And to say these things today is seen to be somehow chauvinistic and sexist, but one of the greatest gifts a woman can give her husband is her virginity. But we can't say these things anymore. We can't say these things. It's the opposite. It's like, oh, I'm 34 and I've had dozens of partners. You need to take me as I am. It's like, no, that's not the way that it should be intended. We should intend it the way it was for centuries. Right? We're virgins. You get married. Yes, unfortunately, men would go to brothels. Older men would go to brothels and so forth. But the intention was, at least the women were virgins. You get married. Marriage is a sexual outlet, which is good and right in the way that God intended. And from that comes babies. And ideally, lots of babies are supposed to come from it. That is the natural order. Yes, there are, of course, couples that are infertile. Yes, there's going to be deviations from that. But that's the natural order. Get married young, have tons of babies, have a large household that's typically going to have laughter and happiness in it. You see this still kind of in the Mormon world, where the Mormons get married very young, 20, 21, 22. And they have 6, 7, 8 kids, and then they end up having like 80 cousins and so forth. But you see in that world, even though the theology is skewed, that world is very, very much into family values and family unity and cohesiveness. And I think they're the few. I mean, there's still there's some trad Catholics and trad Baptists and so forth. But as a whole, if you look at the West doesn't see it, right? Big families. I mean, most people consider big families to be more than 3 kids. They look at you in the grocery store and go, oh my God, you have too many kids. You see how the secular world has skewed the natural inclination and orientation of marriage. So in closing, sex is not bad. Sex is good. God gave us hormones and a sexual drive. God gave us this desire to want to couple with our spouse and to keep coupling with our spouse. So sex is not bad. But in the world of porn and in the world of lust seen in movies and whatnot, it has been distorted. And so we have to reprogram and deprogram ourselves. So if you're older and you might have children, this is something to instill in your children, is that get married young and do it the right way. Don't contracept, don't violate these golden rules that we didn't violate for centuries. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.